Bob Herbert's OpEd.tv is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation with the support of Ann Ulnick. Hi, I'm Bob Herbert. Welcome to OpEd.tv. He's one of the world's wealthiest individuals. He was mayor of New York for 12 extremely consequential years. He's now running for president of the United States, and he's the subject of a compelling new biography, The Many Lives of Michael Bloomberg. My guest is the author of that biography, a former member of the New York Times editorial board and an old friend and colleague, Eleanor Randolph. Eleanor, welcome.
Thank you for having me on, Bob.
Thanks for coming in. It's a terrific book. It's a wonderful read. It's packed with information. I loved it.
Let's stop here.
Yeah, exactly. And because there's a lot that we've got to cover in a short period of time, so I guess we'll get to it. So, Michael Bloomberg, he was not born into a wealthy family. It was actually the family was in kind of pretty modest circumstances. Economically. So tell us a little bit about his childhood. What was it like when he was growing up?
First of all, he had this very strong Jewish connection with a large family of people who had immigrated from the old Soviet Union area. Mm-hmm. And so his father was an accountant. He said his father never earned more than $6,000 a year. And he always made the point that of those $6,000, his father always took out, the amount seems to change every time he tells this story, but he would take out $50 to contribute to the NAACP. Mm-hmm. And he explained to his son then that, discrimination against one group was discrimination against all groups. Right. And so they worked very hard, I think, to give him, he had the sort of almost perfect parents. One, his father adored him. He couldn't do any wrong. His mother was strict. She had she had to hold things down.
This was in Massachusetts, right?
It was Medford, Massachusetts.
Right.
He was born in Boston and he grew up, his parents wanted to buy a house in this little community of Medford, Massachusetts, but they couldn't because they were Jewish.
Right.
And so what they did was they got their Irish lawyer to actually buy the house, and then they bought it from the Irish lawyer. But everybody told me that the community was very warm and the kind of community, it almost seemed like a 1950s sitcom to me.
Kind of idyllic.
Idyllic.
So he was not a great student. At times it seemed, in your book, it seemed like he was an indifferent student, but he got into these great universities. So Johns Hopkins and Harvard Business School.
Right.
So how did that happen? How did this kid who didn't have great grades, how did he get into Johns Hopkins?
Well, for one thing, I think he sort of said one time that his tests were really good. I don't have those numbers. I can't confirm that. But the other thing was that he worked at a little shop, and the woman that he worked for said, "Kid, you've got a great mathematical mind. You should go to Johns Hopkins." And she helped get him into Johns Hopkins. And he has often said that Johns Hopkins should build 3 statues, one to Johns Hopkins, one to him, and one to the admissions director who let him in to Johns Hopkins, because he's given about $3 billion so far to the school.
So his early circumstances, as we pointed out, were modest, and yet he went on to amass one of the great fortunes in American history. How the heck did that happen?
To me, that was one of the really interesting questions I was wrestling with in this book. You know, how did he become such a powerhouse? I mean, you know, as you say, he was, if you look at him in high school, he barely passed French. He, you know, caused so much trouble for the teachers that, you know, they were sort of happy to see see him walk out the door. And yet, so after he went to Harvard, it was the 60s, you know,
Right.
and it was, people were marching in the streets, and he didn't march. He was not a, you know.
He wasn't an activist.
He wasn't one of us, you know, those of us who were out on the streets. And he, but he prepared to go, he was going to go into the Army as an officer.
Right.
But what he said was that he had flat feet.
Uh-oh.
And so he's been challenged about that a couple times. In fact, one of the earlier, Joyce Pernick, who wrote an earlier biography of him, asked him one time about that. And he took off his shoes and socks and showed how flat his feet were. So anyway,
It was the defect of choice. This was during the Vietnam era, which I remember well.
Oh, yeah, me too.
So, you know, this was the defect of choice for a lot of people, but maybe he did have flat
Well,
feet.
you know, that or bone spurs, as
There
we
you go,
know.
right.
So, so anyway, he, this friend of his at Harvard told him to try Wall Street. So he got a job at Salomon Brothers. And one of the great joys for me was talking to people about those years at Salomon Brothers, because Wall Street was like a big frat house, you know, and we can't say most of the things that people said to each other in that climate. It was it was an old boys club.
I got to tell you, you had some quotes in the book. Now, I've known you a long time.
Yeah, I'm so glad my mother was not alive to read this
Even
book.
to have seen that you even wrote those quotes, I was like, oh my goodness, Eleanor.
I know. But anyway, that was the culture of Wall
Right.
Street.
Totally.
But the other thing about him is that he was always telling the bosses how to run the place, you know? And so you knew, I mean, his mother had said early on the one thing about Michael, he always wanted to run everything.
Right.
And so he was that way at Salomon Brothers. And, you know, bosses are not always happy about
Yeah, they don't
being
take to that all the time.
No, but that didn't stop him. The other thing he did at Salomon Brothers that I thought was really interesting was that this was a period when the paper was sort of piling up on Wall Street, and that you got paper emergencies when, you know, it was really difficult to get all. You know, if you bought a share of stock in the 50s or something, you got this beautiful thing
Right.
that those documents had to be passed back and forth from the investment houses like Salomon Brothers to the banks at night. And I would love to see this scene in a movie somewhere where the police are pushing these huge things with all these documents, and they're ex-police or they're retired police.
Yeah, they were the guards because these were these valuable documents.
Yeah,
right?
they were, but anyway, they piled up so much as Wall Street got, as there were more and more trades, that that they had to sort of slow down trading. They had to stop trading in the afternoon. So at that point, computers were just starting out. They were as big as a room, you
Right.
know, but and they were slowly getting smaller and smaller. And Bloomberg kept saying to John Goodfriend, who was the head of Salomon Brothers, we need to computerize. You know, we need to get these computers working for us.
Get control of this paper.
Yeah, to get control of this paper and to have. I mean, he saw that when he was like a kid, you know, in
Right.
his late 20s. Goodfriend bumped him upstairs to this sort of cavernous room and told him he was in charge of computers. He had been an equities trader, which is, you know, if you've seen Wall Street or some of those movies, it was pretty close to that.
And he was great at it, right?
He was great. He was making
Yeah.
tons of money, became a partner. And so they bumped him upstairs to do computers, and this was considered a demotion. He was in charge of computers. That was considered women's work, because it involved typing.
Yep.
And so he was up there. So when another company bought Salomon Brothers, Bloomberg was fired and famously given $10 million. And he talks about this all the time, But he and three guys from Salomon Brothers started this terminal. That story is legend.
So this, in fact, was one of those cases where it was the best thing in the world that could have happened to him. So he created these Bloomberg terminals, complicated devices, but can you just sort of explain briefly what they did and why they became so popular?
Well, they started out with bonds, and if you look at these early terminals, it's really interesting. They look like something I may have taped together from the garage, but they were much more sophisticated than the terminals on people's desks then. At the time, could tell you the price, and things like that. But the Bloomberg terminals on bonds could give you the relationship between the bond you're trying to buy and other bonds of a similar nature. And they could also help you figure out, the one thing they wanted to do is help you figure out the what ifs, they called it. What if everybody sold off their bonds early? What if everybody, and a lot of different what ifs. And other computers didn't do that. They were just fairly straightforward price and stuff like that. And that was the beginning of, for the Bloomberg people, of the whole sort of what they call the analytic culture, which is, it's basically, why should I buy this? Why should I buy this red Impala here when they're trying to sell me a Ford Mustang, And so what happened is that bond traders began to realize how much they needed this kind of extra information that was not just price and time.
It was essentially a very sophisticated analysis of the entire bond market.
It was. It got more sophisticated every year, and they were really smart about getting the bond traders to talk back to them about what they needed.
We're going to have to race ahead because we got to cover his mayoralty and what he's doing now. But he makes these billions of dollars because the Bloomberg terminals become essential for these finance houses all across the country and then internationally.
That's true.
But then suddenly, you and I are over there at the New York Times, and there's going to be an election for mayor, and I don't know about you, but I wasn't thinking about Michael Bloomberg. I don't think that many people were thinking about Michael Bloomberg. And he became mayor. How did that happen?
Well, I have to say that on the editorial board, we endorsed his opponent, Mark Green. And
who was the Democrat in that race and was considered, it was considered if you got the Democratic nomination, you were going to win the election.
That's right.
Even though it was post-Rudy.
He denies this, but there are people who told me he had offered jobs to them in advance. It was just a given that he was going to win.
Right.
Part of it was that he really had fabulous ads, that described himself. Bloomberg did, and he put a lot of money. He ended up putting $70 million in that race, which was stunning. But the other thing, was 9/11. 9/11 came along, and I don't know about you, but most New Yorkers were weak in the knees a bit about it.
It occurred on primary election day,
It occurred
the
on
Democratic
election
primary
day.
election day, yeah.
Yeah, well, Republican too.
Both of them, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
and so after that, I think what happened is people decided that they needed somebody calm. They needed somebody to manage the city. The city was falling into a recession. They needed somebody to bring the city up. Giuliani had left a huge deficit for his successor. And so, I think, I think really 9/11 sort of changed the landscape. There were other sort of things that happened. I think Green made some mistakes.
Right.
He alienated a lot of the Democrats. They just sat on their hands in some areas, and so Bloomberg, won.
Yeah, I mean, Green, I think objectively he was not a great candidate, and Bloomberg had all this money and all those ads, as you talked about, and once 9/11 happened, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the tenor of the city changed. So anyway, as I mentioned, he served 3 consequential terms. Is there a way to sum up the pros and cons of that administration? What were the Bloomberg successes, and then after that, I'll ask you about maybe some of his disappointments.
Well, there are a lot of things. One, he tried to hire the best people who would work for him.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't care much what their political connections were. He tried to hire the best people, and it's a good lesson. So that was one thing. The other thing, he told them, and he stuck to this. He told them to be inventive. He said, look for the goal, and then you find some new way to deal with a solution to that. And so, smoking. One of the reasons that smokers huddle out on the streets now is because of Michael Bloomberg and his health commissioner, Tom Frieden, and they really came up with several ways to do that.
They waged a war against smoking.
They really did, and they won that war, and they began. Bloomberg went on afterwards to fight smoking in Turkey and Russia and Ireland and other places like that.
His other big success would have been crime. Crime had been going down under Giuliani, and it continued to go down under Bloomberg.
He would argue that, but also say that there were no terrorist attacks. There were no more terrorist attacks. And his support for Kelly is one of the reasons we might, look, there are a lot
Raymond Kelly, the police commissioner.
Yes, and there were a lot of other things Bloomberg did. I think one of the big things he did was help create a new university on Roosevelt Island. He added many acres of parks. He changed the zoning of the city. There are a lot of things like that that worked because he hired really good people and told them what the goal was.
What about the either failures or setbacks or disappointments? What were the more negative aspects of the Bloomberg years?
Well, you could say in education that he succeeded in getting control of the schools, which was really necessary. The school system was a bureaucratic nightmare. It was, you had 32 separate school boards and an army of bureaucrats that made almost everything impossible. So he took control of the schools. He moved the school headquarters to the Tweed Courthouse, which is right behind City Hall. But and there were successes there, plenty of them. He closed a lot of bad schools and started a lot of smaller schools that seemed to be working at this point. But he still, that was a huge project that I think he would say, to himself at least, we didn't get where we wanted to go.
And then you refer to stop and frisk, I think it was, as a real blot on his mayoralty. Talk a little bit about the stop and frisk controversy.
It was, obviously, they stopped over 700,000 people in 1 year, almost all black and Hispanic. And the Supreme, it was judged unconstitutional by U.S. Circuit Court Judge Shira Scheindlin. So, and there are a couple of things. One, stop, question, and frisk can be done constitutionally. The courts have set up a system, but what Scheindlin showed was that the police were not using that system.
Well, it's not supposed to be random, and you're certainly not supposed to target a specific racial or ethnic group.
No, you're not. What what I tried to do is go back and figure out how this hole in his legacy happened. And it became apparent that once, first of all, he supported Commissioner Kelly, and he was very loyal to him. But secondly, he started in 2005 going after the National Rifle Association and the gun lobby, and he became, this is my view, he became so focused on guns that he didn't see the downside of it, or refused to see the downside of it. Finally, people have been coming to him ever since he left the mayor's office, telling him that was the hole in his legacy. I wrote it, a lot of people have said it to him, and as you know, right before he decided to run, he apologized, although most people saw that as a political ploy, but at least he finally said he was sorry.
So we've only got a couple of minutes left, but you just mentioned before he decided to run. Bloomberg had decided that he was not going to run for president, and I think essentially the reason was he didn't really see a path to victory. But he changed his mind, and now he is running for president. Why did he change his mind?
Well, I've been told that, well, you know, they have a fabulous polling operation, the Bloomberg people, and they looked at these prime states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, that Trump won, and they saw him winning again.
They saw Trump winning again, right?
Sorry, Trump winning again. And so he just said, why not? I'm getting in there. And the main focus now of his campaign is Trump. He doesn't really, he tries hard, although he slipped a couple of times, he tries hard not to talk about the other Democrats, to aim his money and his fire at Trump and not the other Democrats. Whether he has a chance, I mean, we talked about how I didn't see a chance in 2001, so I'm not predicting one way or another.
The two things I thought would never happen is I didn't think Bloomberg would become mayor, and I didn't think Trump would become president. So I guess I should stay out of the guessing game. In our last half minute or so, he's said that he'd be willing to spend as much as $1 billion on this campaign, and that he would continue to spend the money even if he didn't get the Democratic nomination. How much of an impact can $1 billion have? I mean, at some point, does it just become good money going after bad? Do you think?
I don't think so. I think $1 billion is a really stunning amount. I think for one person to spend on a campaign, and actually, you know, he's worth 54 billion or 56. Goodness. Who's counting? You know, but. So he will barely feel this, and so I wouldn't be surprised. One of his people told me that the numbers are still pretty flexible, so I wouldn't be surprised if it became even more than that. He really thinks Trump is destroying America and in fact the entire globe with his policies on climate change and his on trade and you know, you could go through a long list. So he's decided that's one of his missions. He's 77, he'll be 78 next month.
So he wants to stop him.
Wants to stop Trump.
We're going to stop there. Eleanor Randolph, the book is The Many Lives of Michael Bloomberg, and it is a terrific biography.
Oh, thank you.
We'll be back in a moment with a final word. The stories come and go. It seems nothing is serious enough or catastrophic enough to hold our attention. The wildfires in Australia certainly qualify as catastrophic. Fed by drought and staggeringly high temperatures, at times 120 degrees or more, they roared out of control, ferociously, apocalyptically. Dozens of humans and hundreds of millions of animals died. The area burned was larger than the entire country of Switzerland. The Transport Minister of New South Wales said this is not a bushfire, it's an atomic bomb. It should have been the biggest story on the planet. As Richard Flanagan wrote in the Times right after the New Year, Australia today is ground zero for the climate catastrophe. Its glorious Great Barrier Reef is dying. Its World Heritage rainforests are burning. Its giant kelp forests have largely vanished. And now the vast continent itself is burning on a scale never before seen. It should have been the biggest story, but it wasn't. Donald Trump is the be-all and end-all when it comes to news these days. Climate change is still out there on the periphery, not really taken seriously. But there will come a time when the burning of this planet that we all live on will be the biggest story because the immensity of the tragedy will be unavoidable. There will be fire and smoke and refugees and homeless encampments and suffering comparable to wartime. There will be wailing and lamentations and recriminations and cries of why hadn't we done more to prepare. Australia was one more pathetically ignored warning. The day of reckoning is coming. Trust me. That's all for now. See you next time.